Good evening, everyone. Hi, good evening, everyone.
Hello, Yoni.
Hi, Yanni. Good evening.
Hi, thank you for.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. And children, um, we can see our panelists have joined. Thank you for agreeing to do this with us. Our participants are still joining. While they join, we'll just quickly ask that if you're here, just to remind yourself that your children, if you drop a love emoji or a dance emoji in the comment box, just so we celebrate each other for Children's Day. Happy Children's Day again, and thank you for joining this webinar. Happy Children's Day. Please drop an emoji of love or we can see the emoji and smiles of the good old days and the importance of just being a child, being childlike. And welcome again to our hands to symptoms and management. Show you all that this topic is that important, especially in Nigeria in recent past. I'm sure now more than ever, you know how much this topic is important. And you know how much people need to know more about what and see an emoji of love all our people are joining in from. Thank you to our speakers. We can see most of them already in here. And as we wait, I'm sure that the others will be joining soon. Thank you again for joining us. Children's Day, and we're celebrating children by bringing development courses, symptoms, and management. Each speaker will be talking about topics that will interest you. We encourage that okay, so this webinar is brought to you by Saferworld Foundation. Saferworld Foundation is a non-governmental and non-profit organization to reduce violence, conflict, minimize the impact of violence in individuals, as well as the community. That to achieve lasting peace, people must actively get involved in providing alternatives to violence and have access to fair and Bauchi and Yobe, as well as the north central states of Benue, Plateau, and of course now Taraba and Nasarawa states. Again, Saferworld Foundation has worked in the Northwest in Ocean. We are also partnering on this webinar Let's just stay happy and excited, ready to learn. We apologize for the fluctuation in network, and we are back. Sorry for the interruption. We are back, and please, if you're here with us, kindly drop where you're joining in from so we know where you're joining in from. If you have any comments or you have any questions, just simply raise your hand and we will attend to you. For now, please stay back and be ready to learn new things. So like we said, thank you. We can see FCT, we can see Latvia, we can see Bauchi. Thank you all for joining. It's exciting to have each one of you here. Like we said, Saferworld Foundation is a non-profit organization working to ensure peaceful cohesion. One of our strong areas in Saferworld is psychosocial support. And in the past few years, Saferworld has worked to ensure that especially people from hard-to-reach community are reached, especially to help support their emotional needs. Also, Saferworld has worked earnestly to ensure that children from hard-to-reach communities are able to have support from community members and train support systems known as listening companions to support them through their emotional wounds as they walk through their journey of healing. Set the mood for this webinar just before we go ahead to start with our speakers. We ask that you sit back and enjoy this very short video brought to you by Saferworld to let you know what we've been doing in the last few years in terms of elevating children's trauma in our different communities that we work in. We can see just like to say thank you for joining, and please sit back and enjoy the video. Thank you.
Millions of children around the world suffer unthinkable distress due to violent conflicts, natural disasters, and other humanitarian emergencies. This can take a lifelong toll on their emotional health, physical health, and social development. If exposed in early childhood, the experience can even disrupt a child's brain development. Children exposed to conflict face severe emotional stress that can result in psychosocial and lifelong mental issues. Failure to address mental health and psychosocial support stalls a child's development and hinders them from opportunities to participate meaningfully in society. For adolescents, severe distress and exposure to traumatic events can lead to various harmful practices, including alcohol and drug abuse, leading to poor academic performance, low self-esteem, health issues, self-harm, and even suicide. Psychosocial support is an integral part of Saferworld's activity. Saferworld Foundation works to build the resilience of children and their families, helping them cope with adversities during and after a crisis, conflict, or disaster. We offer psychosocial support to children, adolescents, caregivers, families, and the wider communities through a range of intervention that meets their complex needs. At Saferworld Foundation, we work to create and promote conditions where people actively get involved in minimizing and transforming violent conflicts and building peace by providing alternatives to violence. We also ensure that people have access to fair and effective means of addressing grievances and inequalities that drive conflicts.
Thank you for joining again, and thank you for staying back to be part of this learning process. Everyone here, I'm sure, has had a traumatic experience or knows someone who has suffered some kind of hurtful experience that has left some trauma for them. We can see people watching from Netherlands, Adamawa, and Kenya. Thank you for joining. We will go straight to the next session of events, which will be our speaker. We have 5 speakers who are going to be speaking today. The webinar will take place in this pattern. We have 5 speakers, each talking on a specific topic for 7 minutes. We are expecting that within this minute, participants pay attention, take advantage of the Q&A section on your tab. If you look at your screen, I'm sure you'll see the icon for Q&A. When speakers are speaking, please take advantage and drop your questions there while we will attend to them immediately after the speeches are done. Like I said, we have 5 speakers, and after they are done with their sessions, we will open up to have an interactive session to speak about things that we have learned, make contributions, and have questions that are bothering us in our minds to be answered by these professionals. Again, our first speaker is going to be talking about something exciting. We are excited about it, and we are ready and willing to learn something new. We will just ask that when we introduce the first speaker, please turn on your video so participants can connect with you and have this time to learn something from you. Our first speaker is a woman. She's an exciting personality. She is a jolly good fellow. She loves children and practically lives her life about children. She's a trauma-informed child development expert. She's passionate about raising children from hard places and giving them hope. She believes that every child deserves a family, and over the years has provided shelter for orphaned and vulnerable children around Nigeria. She's the founder and global director of Kingdom Kids Club, the executive director of Anchorville, and a pastor at the Latter House Christian Center. If you know anything about orphan care or have been interested in orphan care, this is the woman to connect with. I know that our mics are off, or wherever you are, with a round of applause, please let's welcome Sandra Chikan. She will be speaking about the causes of trauma and how it affects children. Sit back and learn something from Sandra Chikan. Welcome, Sandra Chikan. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Yompan. Thank you, Saferworld Foundation, for this opportunity to be a part of this celebration. I'm excited because it's Children's Day, and I'm so glad that this is how we're celebrating it, raising awareness on issues that border around child protection and child rights. I'm glad to be here. A couple of years ago, I was introduced to a young boy, and we had started working with the boy in a village, and things happened, and then we eventually brought the child to our facility in Jos. Handsome young boy. Once he came, every single time there was an issue, a child was crying or something, people were fighting, everybody knew that it was this boy. And we kept wondering, why is this boy doing that? So we kept working with him. One Saturday, a number of women came to celebrate their Women's Day or something, and they said it was time to do a dance, a competition. And at that time, we knew our best dancers, and this young man was not one of them. All of a sudden, he started shouting. He said, "I will dance, I will dance." So we said, "Go ahead and dance." At the end of that dance, he took the prize. I don't know what happened, but he danced his heart out. He danced with the whole of his body. Everything was dancing, and he took the day. Fast forward to now, that young boy is a great artist. He's doing very well. He's calm. He's a peacemaker. That for me was my first introduction to a child that had been traumatized, and working with him, not even knowing technical things about trauma and all of that. And so this morning, it's really, for me, it's morning here. It's really a pleasure to be here. And so I'm just going to go straight into it. And I'm going to just speak from my heart based on the work that we've done at Kingdom Kids and the Association of Orphanages. So we're just going to be talking about some causes and effects of trauma on children. Please, the next slide. So since I've been here, I met two young men, and as we go along, I will be sharing a couple of stories to help bring home the point on trauma. So we're going to be defining trauma, but I'm not going to define trauma. There are a lot of definitions about trauma, and I tried to look for the most simplest one, because while I was trying to deal and to work with the children that I have been working with, I found out that there were many times that I went for trainings and seminars, And at the end of the day, I left the place with information, but I couldn't break it down. So this morning, I'm hoping that as simple as I relay this message, you'll be able to pick some points. So trauma defined. This is one of the simplest ones that I got, and I love it. It says, trauma is something that happens to you that makes you so angry that it overwhelms you. You become very upset, you give up because you can't deal with it. Now, there was another story that I read about this Greek legend, and the story goes that this man would just, he was condemned to roll up and to push a stone uphill to the top of the mountain. And obviously, that's like an impossible task. And every time he would push it up, it would come down, up, down, up, down. And finally, you would give up. And so that's a picture of stress and what happens when trauma continues, when adverse conditions or experiences, children have to deal and have to face that. So, but the important thing there is not how you, it's not that, it's how you respond to what happens that is very critical. So it's the trauma that happened, yes, but what happened when it happened? So the trauma is not what happened, but is how you respond to it. Now, for instance, if your father died, like my father died when I was a kid, what did I do? I just chose one of the, like they say, 3 expressions of fear. I shut down, which means I froze. And as we go along, we're going to see how different people respond to different things. Trauma to me might not be trauma to you. Can we go to the next slide? So it's how you respond that is very important. The trauma itself is not what happened, but how you respond to it. Now, they say sometimes when we're working with children, we say, okay, why are you always crying? Why are you always wetting your bed? I've had people who are working with our children and they're always angry that certain children are aggressive, certain children are always fighting. And they say, hey, just grow up or just snap out of it. And I know that even in study, they say that animals, when animals are stressed or they face life-threatening situations, what they do is they shake it off. They shake their body, and that is their own way of releasing or relieving tension. But today we're talking about children, and this is a child saying, I am not an animal, so don't tell me to shake it off. Don't begin to take a position where you feel that the child is in control of what happened to him, and so he's able to shake it off. No, they are not animals, and that is not the way that children respond to trauma. Please go ahead. The next slide. So this is one other definition that I'd like you to take a look at. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, childhood trauma is defined as the experience of an event by a child that is emotionally painful or distressful, which often results in lasting mental and physical events. So clearly there's an experience, something happened, and it just messed up with the mind of the child, messed up with his emotions. And this is not just one experience that you would just pinpoint. Sometimes it's not just one experience and you say that's the experience, but sometimes they could be a couple of experiences. For others, it's just one experience. I've just talked to someone who said that their mother forgot him at school, and that was very, very traumatic, and he remembers it. And I'm wondering, coming from Nigeria, they forget you in school, you'll be like, yeah, they will come and pick you. But trauma to one, might not be trauma to you, but everybody experiences trauma in their own way. What can be traumatic for a brother might not be traumatic to a sister. I just spoke to another individual, one young man here, and he said his own father is a drug abuser, he's violent, and it affected him, but it didn't affect his sister. So trauma can affect children in different ways. Next slide. So what is important when trauma happens? And for me, I'd like to say relationships. When trauma happens, who was there? What's the extent of trauma? How did they respond? And someone gave an analogy and said, look, if a dog bites you and nobody comes to your rescue, and maybe the dog continues to bite you, and the father might be there and they say, hey, just get up, be a man, that would really scar you. But if something happens like that and everybody rushes to hold you and take care of you, that will influence something, that would calm you, and that will let you understand that you are safe and there is support for you. So relationships, and I found that out in our work, that the moment a traumatized child comes into our facility, the love, the care, it doesn't happen in one day. So it takes a lot of patience, and it takes a lot of understanding, and it takes a lot of training for you to embrace a child and provide and that safe place, and let that child know that you are that safe place, that whatever it is that happened to that child at the time it happened, maybe the adults there failed him, maybe they showed that they were not concerned, but still, when you do the reverse and you begin to earn the trust of the child by showing them how much you care, that begins to change the mindset of the child and brings healing and wholeness to the child. Next slide. So studying and just preparing for this, I came across one of the studies, and they said whether the man said something about having the cockroach brain. And the cockroach, they say in quote, has two brains. Well, technically is one, but it has one up and then one in his abdomen or so. And what happens when stress happens or when there's trauma to a child is like there are two brains that we have. One, the brain that is called the cockroach brain is the survival brain, where every time the message that you get because you have faced trauma is you're in danger, there's something happening, you're a target, you're not safe, But then as the trauma, the incident has happened, instead of moving on, the message you begin to relive, you keep reliving that incident, and it keeps sending that message to that brain, which is called the cockroach brain, in quote, which is a survival one that says, I need to take care, I need to protect myself, I'm in danger, I'm a target. And that's why different times the children are aggressive, they're angry. Why? Because that message keeps coming. I'm a target, I'm in danger, nobody likes me, nobody is standing for me, nobody is supporting me. And that is the place where work needs to take place. But then there's also the learning brain, where children understand that they're confident and they're able to embrace whatever it is that they're facing. So looking at that, I know that our children don't have the cockroach brain, it's just an analogy. But when trauma happens, they always say that I used to, in my previous training, it was 3 Fs, but now there's a 4th F that I have also seen in our work. So when it happens, the child can respond in different ways. They can fight, they can run away, that is flight, or they can just shut down, which is what happened to me when I lost my parents. And when you're fighting, a typical example of that kid I talked to you about, they'll be angry, they have rage, they're irritable, they will attack, they will try to defend themselves. Or when it happens, the response would be they will panic, they will fear, they'll have a lot of anxiety, and they will take off. When you're like me, or you're like other children that I've worked with, sometimes all you do is just shut down. You're detached and you're stuck. Quite a number of, a couple of kids that we work with take this position. So, different children take the 3 position, but quite a number even just freeze. But the 4th one that I didn't put here is what they call fawning, which means that the child, because the child is afraid and doesn't want to get to the point where you remind him of that trauma or you deal with him, he just does what he thinks will keep him safe. So he'll say the right words or just hide in a place and just pretend that all is fine. Why? Because he's afraid that you might take him to the place where he doesn't want to go, which is reliving the trauma or perpetuate that trauma. Next slide. So a couple of years ago, like this is a long time ago, trauma competent caregivers, psychologists, there was a study, and I think they said it's from some guy called Kaiser, and most studies on trauma look at these experience, look at this acronym. It's called ACEs, and it just means adverse childhood experiences. And there are different types that were identified to help doctors, to help social workers deal with trauma. And they were categorized under 3 major headings. So you have the abuse, physical, emotional, and sexual. You have neglect, and then you have the community or household challenges. So quite a number of us are aware, even with the children that we've worked with, some have been physically abused, emotionally and sexually abused. Neglect is very, very tough. This is tough on a child. This is when the child, there's a deficit in meeting his basic needs, emotional needs. The child is abandoned. The child is made to feel that he doesn't even exist or he's not worth our time. Then household challenges like growing up in families where caregivers or a caregiver was an alcoholic, drug user, divorced, separated, violent, or had mental illness. There was a 4th one, which is the community one, the community challenge, which is what we're seeing in Africa and in Nigeria and even in Jos, is where there are communal clashes and violence. All of these experiences have a way of dealing and affecting the psyche of children and causing trauma to these children. And time will fail me to give you an example of children that we've worked with, one after the other, that have fallen into all of these categories. And for the better part of their growing up years, this was what they faced. And honestly, I've been here in America for a couple of weeks, and there's been shooting in New York. There was shooting in elementary school. In Nigeria, Deborah Samuel was killed and burnt. Gruesome things like this that happen have a way of affecting the children. The young man that I was working with, as soon as he heard that a few days ago, the next day he was here, and all of a sudden he said he's leaving. He started vibrating, he went red, he was going out. And I said, where are you going? He said he's going to the pier. I didn't know what he was going to do until we were able to calm him down. And I can imagine that just reading on the news, hearing your parents talk about it, watching social media, how that affects the psyche of our children, and it's stressful for them, and it affects their overall development. Next slide. Next slide, please. So the effects, these are a couple of them, and I will just run through it for the sake of time. And then at the end of the day, aggression, where they're always fighting, they're always upset, they're anxious. I have a couple of kids who have unending nightmares. They remember, they wake up and they feel somebody's doing what they had done to them. They don't trust adults anymore. They don't trust people. They have low esteem. They don't believe in themselves. They don't believe they're worth anything. Sometimes they eat a lot, and sometimes they don't even eat at all. They become clingy. They don't want to leave you. They think of killing themselves, like that boy I just talked with a few days ago. They lose interest in things that they were excited about before. They can begin to cut themselves, smoke, substance abuse, just because they don't have any control over their thoughts, over their minds anymore, because of that experience that they had. And then there is, because of trauma, there is an increased risk of long-term health issues. And some of the kids that we've worked with, the adverse experience was when they were like 3 or 4, they're 20 or even 25, and you can still see that some of them are struggling, some of them are on medication, and it's just a sad situation when you look at all of this and how that impacts our children. Next slide, please. So our experience in orphan care, most people think that it is only those children that are in orphanages that are traumatized, but I think that trauma is everywhere. Many people have been traumatized, but to be very honest, and this is what I've been saying for the past few years, I've been in orphan care 10 years running right now, and I will say categorically that children do not belong and do not deserve to grow up in orphanages. They need loving families. Remember when we said that the key to getting a child help when he faces trauma is a loving relationship. Now, in orphanages, there are too many children, very few workers. The kids don't get one-on-one attention. There's so many things I can pinpoint to you that shows that the children in orphanages, even though they come from traumatic experiences and they have those experiences, when they come in, it's a lot of work to begin to work on each and every one of them. And so this is a challenge, honestly. I know that there are a couple of our kids that, yes, I can say we are doing a good job and our partners have come together, our staff, and we have really done some great work, but I can tell you that there's a lot more work to be done in orphanages, in which for me is bringing from orphanages. You look for other alternatives in the community or family situation so that trauma is lessened and the effect, because sometimes you bring them to orphanages, I can tell you it's trauma on trauma, sadly. Next slide, please. Trauma doesn't stop at what happened. So it's not the event, it changes your brain. And that's, I started talking about the cockroach brain where different things happen. Now, if you're going to check that at the same time, if you don't get the support, all sorts of things can happen, and it stunts the development of your brain. Finally, I think I'm almost out of time. Quickly, the next slide. Escape, I've said it, relationships, significant nurturing relationships. I think I've said that before. Next slide. Thank you very much. As we go along, maybe as questions, then I can be specific and share the experiences that we've had. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much for that insightful talk. I'm sure that a lot of people are learning. They are taking notes. Thank you so much. One thing that we took seriously is that trauma is something that happens to you that makes you so angry that overwhelms you. I mean, that's the simplest way of explaining trauma. Thank you so much for simplifying this for us. That was Sandra Chikan speaking on the causes of trauma and how it affects children. You can drop any comments for her in the chat box. Don't forget to drop your questions in the Q&A session. Thank you. It was really insightful. It was clear and simple. Also, if you look at your screen, I'm sure you'll see that we have polls up. These polls, when you answer them will help us drive our interactive discussion. So please take your time and see that you answer this poll. The simple question there is, do you think trauma-sensitive communities and school will lead to peaceful coexistence? If yes, please answer yes. If no, please put no. We are looking forward to our next speaker. Again, thank you so much for that insightful talk. Thank you. Sandra Chikan is the Executive Director of Anchorville and the Global Director for Kingdom Kids Club. We know that she runs a shelter. Today is Children's Day. And to support what she's doing, please feel free to make any donations to Kingdom Kids Club as part of your support. Thank you so much. So I'm sure if you're looking at your screen, you see how you can support Kingdom Kids Club. Thank you. So while that is going on, we'll be introducing our second speaker. Our second speaker is a young man who is passionate about trauma care. He loves children. When we say love children, he loves children with the whole of his heart. He is always willing to give a helping hand. He is a team player, and he is the Assistant Director for Back-to-Back Ministries in Jos. He is a loving man. He's married and has 1,000,001 children all around Jos. I know that some of the children that he is most passionate about are the children under their care at Back-to-Back Ministries. Back-to-Back works with different communities and different orphanages in Jos. His name is Adubike Kalu. He's the Assistant Country Director at Back-to-Back Ministries Nigeria. He's a trauma healing expert and has almost a decade of experience working with children as a staff of Back-to-Back Ministries. He has been involved in training several organizations in classes take on trauma competence and manages several managers that head the different departments to ensure quality in meeting the developmental needs of the children they serve. He loves children, has a passion for what he does, and believes that until every child is known and loved, he will keep pushing. Please, again, with a round of applause and with our listening ears, let's welcome Adubike Kalu speaking on identifying symptoms of trauma in children. Adubike, the stage is yours. Thank you very much. Mine is off, so I can't tell. Adubike, we can't hear you and we can't see you. Please, can you check your video and your mic so we can go ahead? Adubike. Our second speaker seems to be having a little network challenge. Let's give him a couple of seconds and see if we just move to our third speaker.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, thank you. It's raining so heavily here. I just hope that won't interrupt our sound. I really want to say thank you to Saferworld Foundation for inviting me to speak on this webinar. It's really exciting for me. For me, it means all the information and knowledge that we're going to be gaining from here is just translating back to a community. So just one community at a time, one home at a time, one child at a time receiving healing for trauma. So that's the biggest thing for me. Thank you, Saferworld. Yes, I am very, very passionate about children and working with children. I like to put my hand up in anything that has to do with children. So happy Children's Day to all the awesome kids around the world today. So again, thank you all for joining this webinar, because you also just said yes, just raised your hand to bring in healing to the children in your home and the children in your community. So thank you for joining. Thank you again, Yoni. Yes, I'll be speaking. Can I have my slide, please? I'll be speaking on identifying symptoms of trauma in children. Thank you. Next slide, please. So symptoms of trauma in children can only or mostly be identified by behaviors. It's almost as simple as that. Behaviors, the things that we see. So we've learned that, and there's this phrase by an awesome child specialist. She said, behavior is the language of children that have lost their voice. When they lose their voice, what we see is behavior. Most of the time, that behavior is not what is fancy or what is really cute for us to see or express. They lost their voice, and that's why they put behaviors. That is what trauma is, from what our speakers spoke about before. That is what trauma is. They don't have the ability to express themselves with words anymore. They use behaviors, and those behaviors get us frustrated, get us to feel the kind of, why are you behaving like this? Why are you behaving like that? That is trauma from the inside. So there's always meaning behind behavior. That's why I want to talk about this before we talk about some of those things that we can see, I want to know and touch and feel as the symptoms when we want to identify trauma in children. There's always meaning behind behavior. It's very, very important to know that, because children can only do what they know. They can only do what they know. Children can't just do what they didn't know before. And so I have this also beautiful quote for you. What children can't talk out, they can't act out. They act out, I mean. When they can't talk out, they act out. Believe me, that when their voices is being suppressed, they act out. They show you in different ways that you really don't want to see. Next slide, please. So it's like a tree. So like I said before, there's meaning behind behavior. So it's like a tree. A tree that has leaves or fruits. Those behaviors are the things that we see. They are the fruits or the leaves that we see from the tree. That comes from somewhere. That could be trauma. So those things are the roots. We can't see them, but they are bedded by something, right? So there's meaning behind behavior. I'll repeat that maybe 100 times before I finish. There's always meaning behind behavior. And the reason for that is some of these things we're going to get into as to the symptoms we want to identify and we want to see trauma in children. There are things we see every day, we see everywhere, we see on the streets. But identifying that this one or this behavior is the one from a traumatized child is the difference. It's what we're trying to talk about now. So there's always meaning behind behavior. So before we continue again, I would like to talk about two other core reasons for behavior: frustration and aggression. What you see on the screen there is a child. So you can put a child in your mental picture, in your head right now. So that's a child who has this box of things that they do not like and they cannot change. It could be the loss of a parent, the loss of both parents. It could be a gruesome, dire situation that was very, very traumatic. You can't change that. You can't bring back a dead parent, right? You can't do that. So this child has this box of stuff that they cannot change. So let's use a baby for an example. So when this baby has this thing, the baby is hungry, right? They can't use their words. What would they do? They will cry. They'll cry, mommy, mommy, I'm hungry. That's what I'm trying to tell you, right? So when the mommy doesn't meet the need, doesn't breastfeed or give milk or something, that is frustration. They continue to cry. And so when that trauma or that place of frustration has not been addressed or processed with that child, it moves to aggression. So frustration can move to aggression when there is no process or someone helping the child with process, like the earlier presenter talked about relationship. So there's nothing to help the child process, you move to aggression. That's another thing you can identify when you want to see trauma. Next slide, please. So as we continue, I want to say something about the brain of the child. I know the presenter before talked about it, but children with trauma live most of the time in their fear brain. Their fear brain where they are always alert, where they are always on the lookout, where they are all, because they're not sure, like I said, what they can talk out, they act out. They're not sure what the next thing is going to be. So they're always on the fear brain. Next slide, please. So there was a research done by a children's specialist. Next slide, please, yes. So he did a research on the brain of a normal 3-year-old and the brain of an extreme neglect child of the same 3-year-old. So he found out that it's the brain of the 3-year-old that is normal. The size was bigger, and the brain of the neglected child of the same 3-year-old shrunk. Even the blood flow of that neglected child wasn't the same as it would flow for that of a normal child. We'll see why this is important. Next slide, please. So all of this trauma, what it does in a child is fear. And this is global, by the way. So what we're saying is not, we keep talking about research and research and research. We don't get a lot of that here when we're talking about this in Nigeria. We get them from everywhere. But fear, this is global. We're not talking about a Western knowledge. We're not talking about a Western finding. This is global, everywhere. So fear impacts the brain of a child. We just saw pictures about what and how it affects the brain. So all of these things are the things that will be the response when we see fear, how we can also identify those things. It shuts down their thinking capacity. So when a child is coming from school and he cannot comprehend, or when a child is 15 years old and is in primary 5, we wonder, why are you thinking like this? Or you see bad behavior, child bullying people at school, or you see suppressed conscience, and you see unable to discern needs, like I talked about. You can't talk out what you need. You can't express your needs with your words. You see protective strategies when someone is becoming a bully at school or a bully in the streets or at home. But I want to talk about the fight, flight, freeze. It's so interesting that our earlier speaker spoke about this. Next slide, please, about this. This is the response of fear. Next slide, please. Is the response of fear that we get. Children who live from their fear brain most of the time have this response. Flight, fight, flight, or freeze. One of these things will happen when the child, sometimes it's something about the trauma that is reoccurring or remembrance. There was a situation one time with a child. They went shopping with the caregiver to buy Christmas clothes. So they went to the market, bought beautiful Christmas clothes and got back home. It was so beautiful, everyone was excited. So when the child got home, then the child went to take that clothes that they bought for her. She was also excited and threw it in the bathroom. The caregiver was so upset, like, what is the meaning behind this? Why did you do that? So later when they got talking, the child explained to the caregiver how that dress reminded her of some traumatic situation about the color was looking like what the mother wore when the father was beating and abusing the mother. So, exactly. So next slide, please. So these fear responses, we see them in this kind of ways. So these things, like I said before, are the things that you see every day on the streets and at home, at school. They're normal things. But the difference for us is to identify and know that there's meaning behind the behaviors that we're seeing. So these responses are the symptoms of how we can identify trauma in children. This is how they look. They look like aggressive behavior. So now we know, we've heard trauma causes and all of that. So when we see a child who is exhibiting excessive aggressive behavior, we should know and think there could be just a reason behind that behavior. That is one symptom. You see sadness and depression. Just ask yourself, what is the meaning behind this behavior? You see bedwetting. I've heard one time that bedwetting is a curse. That you're witchcraft, you're being witchcraft, and that's why you're bedwetting. Really, bedwetting could be the roots of trauma of a child, or eating disturbance, or hard time concentrating. You see a child bouncing here and there. You want to ask again, what's the meaning behind these behaviors, or nightmares, or poor peer pressure? This one is very interesting, and we tend to most times yell at the child. When you see a child not wanting to pair with his own age mates or his own gender type, or a child who wants to just, I don't even want to mix at all. I want to stay in this corner and just play with stones. there's a meaning behind that behavior. Or clingy or separation anxiety situation, or language delay, or feeling shame or guilt, or sexually active. All of these things are the symptoms, are the things that we can see and ask ourselves that question. What is the meaning behind the behavior? Thank you, Saferworld, again for this time. Again, I am really grateful because I want to believe that everything that we're hearing now and we're learning now, we want to use it back home and back to our communities and back to our society to make our world safer. Thank you so much for this time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Azubike. Thank you for putting us through how to identify trauma. Indeed, the language of a child who has lost his voice is behavior. So after this meeting, I'm sure when you see a child hitting his head on the wall, it's not just because he's a naughty child. Please pay attention and let's get these signs. Also, thank you, Azubike, for letting us know that as strong as a child being sexually active when he's not supposed to be, and as little as a child bedwetting can be a symptom of trauma. This has been really educative. I can see comments already coming in. Please don't forget to drop your questions. We are excited about learning something new this evening. Again, Azubike is the Assistant Country Director for back-to-back works in Nigeria to support orphan and vulnerable children, supporting them with educational, emotional, psychosocial, and spiritual needs. Thank you so much, Azubike, for this session. If you're excited, if you're learning something new, please don't forget to drop in the comment section. Tell us what you're learning. Tell us what you're gaining. Maybe someone didn't get it. Drop something that you're learning from someone. Just drop it in the comment box so that we can hear from you. Don't forget also to take advantage, take our polls. These polls will drive our conversation for today. Again, the question for today is, do you think trauma-sensitive communities and schools will lead to peaceful coexistence? If yes, please let us know. If no, let us know. If you're not quite sure, also feel free to let us know. But most importantly, we want to get your questions. We want to hear your comments. We want to know how you're feeling. If you're just excited, just drop excited. If you're learning, just drop learning. Like we said, we have 5 speakers today. This is brought to you by Saferworld Foundation in partnership with Kingdom Kids Club and back-to-back Ministries, all in just. We are taking notes of the questions and we'll answer them after all of the speakers have spoken. We will go straight to the third speaker. Our third speaker will be speaking about trauma and how it affects childhood trauma and how it affects education. He is also a trauma expert. He works in peace building. He is from Kenya and works mostly in the eastern part of Africa. Peter Sereti works for Transforming Community for Social Change, TCST, as a programs coordinator. He helps coordinate African Great Lakes Initiative, AGLI, programs in Kenya. He is a psychosocial counselor by profession with experience in psychosocial interventions through practice and training in trauma healing, peace programs, conflict management, evaluation of work plans based on project impact indicators. A committed volunteer with good interpersonal participatory skills of facilitation and presentation. An international peace facilitator. He will be speaking on trauma and its effect on education. One thing we know about Peter is that he's passionate about change and he's willing to give his best to ensure that people have some relief from their traumatic experience. Please let us, with a listening ear, also from where you are, with a round of applause, let's welcome Peter Sereti all the way from Kenya. Welcome, Peter, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Today I want to join the Federal Republic of Nigeria in celebrating the Children's Day. I understand it was
Peter, we can't really hear you. If you can increase your volume, we'll appreciate that. Please increase your volume if you can.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to thank you for inviting me
No,
into
can't
this
hear.
discussion. Can you hear me?
No, we can't really hear you. Please, if you can, we can hear you, but faintly. Faintly.
Okay.
We can hear you, but not very loud. So you can increase your volume.
Can you hear me now? Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. It's better now. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I was saying that today I just want to join the Republic of Nigeria in celebrating Children's Day. It was in May 27th in 1964 that the day draws attention to bring to the force awareness on the problems facing children. This include, from my perspective, denial of education opportunity, subjection to violence, in my context and in my country, female genital mutilation, forced and early marriages, child labor, exposed to child prostitution, drug pushing and abuse, and in some cases, we find children being forced into military and malicious group. Today, on invitation of Saferworld Foundation, I join the people of the world in recognizing that a childhood trauma needs to be addressed, and it is our responsibility to create a safer space for these children, because if that trauma is not transformed, probably it's going to be transferred. I want to talk about childhood trauma and how it affects education. All of us have gone through school, and I remember some of the children on their first day to school, some will be happy and some will be excited just to be part of school.
Hello, Peter. Please, I don't know if there's a way you can bring your mic closer. We can hear you, but faintly. If you can bring your mic closer, we'll appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm saying that all of us have had the chance to go in a school as children. And sometimes children will be excited to join a school, and others will cry on the first day, wanting to go back home. When the gates of a school of an early childhood education opens, it invites a child who has been exposed to overwhelming experience. From the sharing by Sandra, we've seen the causes of trauma, and Brother Kalu has carefully identified symptoms of trauma. For many children who have experienced traumatic events, the school setting can feel like a battleground. And for instance, my first day in school, I was given a paper and pen. We start with scrabbling. And there's this child who will react in three different ways. A child who will be given pen and paper, he will scrabble. And when that pencil breaks, there's this child that will scream. There's this other child that will throw the pencil on the ground, and this child will remain calm. Some of these kids have helplessly witnessed violence, especially in the family that have experienced gender-based violence. Some of these children have been raised by parents who abuse substance and drug abuse, parents who are struggling with depressions and mental issues because of life stresses. It is true, many kids from the third world countries like my country, poverty also play a key role when it comes to trauma. All these experiences can lead to academic difficulties. And as a student gets older, without a trauma-sensitive institution, it exposes the child into a self-destruction. From a first speaker who said sometimes they adopt a self-meditated destruction behavior like substance abuse, smoking, and just being hyper vigilant. All these responses to traumatic event can truly interfere with the ability of the child to learn. For instance, when we take kids to school, we will want them to read, to write, take part in a discussion, solve a broken square puzzle. And when that doesn't happen, sometimes teachers tend to either punish the kid, write a letter inviting the parents to school, not forgetting that from our two speakers, this kid has come from a background that has forced him or her to have undergone traumatic experience in his childhood. And all this will diminish concentration. Sometimes they'll have issues with memory. Name writing will be difficult. Repeating what the teacher has told them will be a challenge to them. Once this traumatic experience happens, our second speaker, Brother Kalu, said, the brain shrinks and it blocks the child. This hinders the child's success in school. And sometimes some children, this can lead to problems of academic performance. Some children will develop inappropriate behaviors in class, either by bullying the other kids, either by withdrawing and not wanting to concentrate on school. Others will have self-destruction, which will put him or her in a difficult situation to create even friendship and relationship in class. For example, the kid will have problems with the teacher, he'll have the problem with the school bus driver. At some point, he will have problems with even the cook who cooked tea and snack in school. Finally, it is important for the teacher to learn about the impact of trauma to avoid misunderstanding. And some children have difficulties in learning. Once we understand this, because in many schools, like in Kenya, we have a teacher who is a guiding and counseling teacher, a teacher who will want to address or talk to a child who has already done a mistake, not going back to the history of this child to understand that this child has come to this institution, maybe one, with a traumatic past event, and two, maybe he is trying to show some of the symptoms that we've learned today. And if we are not carefully to look into this, it takes this child into a self-destruction. Trauma also can interfere with the capacity of this child being creative when it comes to playing. And also sometimes it stops this child from interacting both inside class and outside. I was thinking about some of the solutions that have been put out. One, and this is very important, we need to create schools that are trauma sensitive institutions so that they are very keen in identifying and helping this kid who has shown some of the symptoms of trauma and get help so that the child feels safe physically, socially, emotionally, and academically. Number two, the school should address the student need holistically. Nowadays, schools are based actually on academic, for example, on exams. The schools should take into account about the relationship of this child with other students, self-regulations to avoid self-harming, academic competence that is not only exam-based, but a curriculum that should be based on competence, physical and emotional well-being of this child. Also, the school should connect with the child at the school and at the community level to provide multiple opportunities of and to practice new developing skills, because these kids comes to school with different talents. It is the responsibility of the school to help this child identify what they are good at and support them pursue that. Then finally, it takes us back to the parents. The modern parents are very busy. They have left their kids to guardians. They've left their kids to teachers only. Parents should spend some quality time from their busy schedule to make sure they understand their children, because many children have been violated, have been abused by the people they've been entrusted with. So again, it is very important as safe as we go into celebrating this day to make sure that we listen to these kids. Some of these kids have issues, both unknown to them and some are just struggling. So it is our responsibility as players when it comes to issues to the kids to be very keen and sensitive to make sure we support them. Thank you very much, Safe for the World Foundation, for giving me this opportunity to share about the challenges a child will face when it comes to education. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Peter. That was really, really educative. I'm sure that one thing everyone is getting from this is that even though we are from different climes, the context is not so different. I'm sure that we all agree that the responses to trauma, as shared by our first and second speaker and also our turn, is one of the biggest things that affect a child's education. We also learned from him that acting in by being withdrawn or acting out by being a bully in any way can affect your education. We also learned that one of the consequences of trauma can be dependence on drugs, which can highly affect a child's output academically. But one of the things I loved about everything he said is that he tried to proffer a solution. And one of the biggest solutions I'm going to take home is, one, parents need to spend more time with their children, but most importantly, we need to have schools that have trauma sensitivity, schools that are more trauma informed. Thank you so much, Peter, for taking the time to share with us. I'm sure that our participants will have questions for you or comments, so please stay on the webinar. And when it's time for Q&A, I'm sure that you'll have something more to say. Please, the panelists should remember that they will have a chance to give last words. Participants should also make sure that they ask any questions they want to ask. The Q&A icon is there. Please take advantage of it. Again, don't forget to take our poll so we know and we can suggest ways to our government based on the outcome of this webinar. I know that we've all been seated, we've been listening, and it's been 3 amazing speakers. We are learning. I can see people dropping trauma-sensitive institutions, so people are learning a lot from all of our speakers. Quickly, I know that we don't have our videos on because this is a webinar, but I know that everyone can hear me. So quickly, we want you to just pay attention. We're going to unmute your mics, and while we unmute your mics, we're going to have a quick energizer to just refresh our brain so that when we come back for our 2 speakers, we'll be active and ready. So as we know, today is Children's Day. If you're seated, please stand. I know I can't see you, but we're all adults, so we're going to trust you to be standing. So let's all be upstanding. We're going to play a video, and I want us to watch it the first time and the second time to do a little sing along of the video. So our video is going to play right now. I just want you to dance along.
Happy Children's Day. I wish it will come true. A happy day to you. Happy Children's Day. Make a wish it will come.
Okay, so I just want everyone to sing along. I'm sure you've listened to the video. Just sing along and wish yourself a happy Children's Day. I'm sure you can enjoy my dance as you watch the video. So let's go. 1, 2, 3.
Happy day to you.
Happy Children's Day.
Oh, nice.
Happy Children's Day.
Nice. Who has that nice voice? Amazing. Thank you so much. I'm sure that we are all now refreshed. Let's come back to our 4th speaker. We can mute all our mics. We're muting back your mic. Thank you for participating. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's come back to our 4th speaker. Let's come back to our fourth speaker. We're muting our mics. I'm sure that we are all refreshed and energized to listen more. It's been really exciting and educative. We learned about the causes and effects of trauma on our children. We also learned how to identify these things. So now we know better. We know what to identify, and we also learned how it affects children's education, because of course we know how important education is, but if we do not address the traumas of children, it means that their education will be affected. Now it's time for us to take another turn and listen to two more amazing speakers that will be talking about two amazing topics. I know that one thing that drives human beings is what they believe in, which we commonly know as faith. Whether you're Hindu, you're Christian, you're Muslim, I'm sure you understand that faith is important in the way that you whether manage or respond to trauma. Our fourth speaker will be talking about trauma and faith. Her name is Riret Ofwandare. Riret is a behavioral therapist, a certified emotional intelligence coach, licensed trauma therapist who specializes in neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, advanced training for trauma treatment of complex PTSD, overcoming compassion fatigue with professional resiliency, trauma and addiction. Host of the Healing Room, Riret is also the foundation director of the Miriam Gofan Women and Children Foundation. She is actively working with women and young girls in Nigeria, Kenya, and Uganda. She specialized in helping people around Africa. She will be speaking on trauma and faith. Please let's, with a listening ear and with a round of applause from wherever we are, let's welcome Riret Gofwan speaking on trauma and faith. Riret, the stage is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Saferworld Foundation, Saferworld Foundation. It's such a pleasure. And I would like to thank everyone who spoke before me. They made my job so easy. They made my job so easy. So I'll just go straight to hitting the point. Thank you, Auntie Sandra. It's amazing to see you. And, you know, I feel so excited because I'm connecting with people who are doing a lot of the work that we are doing. Like, we should have a whole community of people who are doing this work, because trauma is becoming something that is very prevalent. So as someone who throughout childhood had experienced trauma, it set me on this journey to find out what I felt in my body, what I was thinking, what was going on. And so far so good. It's been 13 years of this amazing learning and joy and experiencing this. And while I was getting ready to start talking about this, I wouldn't be sharing all of my slides because it would be that I will be repeating everything everyone had said before me. So now that you all have beautifully explained it, I will come in from where faith comes in. So while I was preparing for this, I just got out of a session with a 10-year-old boy who just got in, and we're having a conversation during a pre-session. In order for him to be able to deal with this loss, he lost his dad, then immediately he lost his sister to a gas explosion, and he got bullied in school, and he's experiencing a lot. And because I work with a lot of women, one of the best things that usually happens to people is the question is, why me? Why me? Why did this happen? And usually there's this silence. That the silence is so deafening that you're not getting a response. So it begins to make you question everything. So let me go straight to the definition of, I think, Orphan, I need you to take me to where I defined the first place where I defined the slide from the beginning, because everyone has talked about what trauma is. I would like to draw attention to something quite interesting when it comes to dealing with children from the beginning. When we define trauma, everyone had talked about, we have the different definitions of trauma, and Sandra was just did the short thing that you would always remember in the layman's word, because usually people are so overwhelmed with the definitions of what we have in this whole, clinical world. Everyone is trying to give bogus definition, and people are experiencing stuff that they need to give words to it and, simple definition. So while we were defining what trauma was as a response to a deeply distressing event that overwhelms an individual's inability to cope, that causes the feeling of hopelessness, and it diminishes your sense of, your sense of self and your ability to feel the full range of emotions and then your experiences. But we also forget that trauma is not only what happened to us. Trauma is also what did not happen to us. Trauma is what was ignored in a child, what was suppressed in a child, and what was not nurtured. Because next slide, please, because we are designed in a way as human beings to be able to have three fundamental needs for human beings. One, the need for safety, the need for connection, the need for authenticity. And next slide, when trauma happens to you, it goes on and it shuts down all of this. So for children, childhood trauma is an event that frightens them. And what could be traumatic for one child might not be traumatic for another. So I see people who grow up in Ajegunle, they find it as a way of life. They don't see in the slums of Lagos, they don't see the kind of life that they are living as traumatic. Then an event might happen, someone who lives in VGC can just lose someone very close to them. And that's the beginning of a traumatic experience for that child. Having established that these three fundamental needs, when this need or one of them is not met, something happens to us. And I'm going to tie it up with faith. Next slide, please. Next slide. So when these three needs are not met, what happens is that we go into what I call the survival mode. And when one of these needs go unmet, we disconnect and we're in survival strategy. The child goes into this whole survival strategy. So once disconnection sets in, our perception of self and the world is distorted. So when children experience this safety and connection or whatever it is, because they're in a family, in an environment that has some specific values that come from faith, faith, what we believe, the mode of how things work. When that trauma happens, something changes for them. So to connect you back to the 10-year-old boy that I was having a session with, and I asked him a question this evening, and I said, what do you think happened to you? And if you had a question, who would you ask? What is going on? And why is all of this happening? And he said to me, I would want to ask God, and everyone keeps telling me that my dad, my sister, they're in heaven. But God didn't ask me when he decided to take them. And so I need him to respond back to me and tell me why he would take everyone and leave just mommy and myself. And I prayed. So we are always wondering why we grow up and we see adults who lose their faith, who lose some sense of self from identity, where we see ego play out. We see people. We see the 40-year-old man, the 45-year-old man, but it's the 8-year-old and the 20-year-old man, 20-year-old running in an adult. We see it in unresolved trauma, and we also see it in children, because then they become reserved. You see the behavioral effects of trauma, it begins to play out. So young man, can we now go to where I said after a traumatic experience, that is the last slide. So I tie it now. So after a traumatic event, a child is impacted. So because trauma, we keep on arguing in the clinical world and people feel that talk therapy is what is helping. And I keep on telling them that because trauma is an experience, it is felt in the body. There is the emotional side, there is the intellectual side that, takes control of the brain, your inability to process information, to take decisions, to learn, the experiences, the flashbacks that keep on coming for children. We see it behaviorally as how they respond, they weed, their ball syndrome. We see the reaction as they go into teenagehood, unresolved trauma, it begins to show up. And so because it's physically, trauma is felt. You have the anxiety, you have the clenching, you have the way you feel the heart, the constriction that comes with your chest when they fully want to express the full range of how fear is felt in the body. And so we go into this stage of hopelessness, even for children who are trying to know God. Even in a faith-based environment, who they say, don't worry, it's in the past. The 3 dimensions of trauma to consider in healing is when we begin to tie all of this and we begin to focus that trauma, apart from an event, it is an experience. So trauma is also felt in the body. It's also, you have the emotions, then you have the physical part, then you have where the thoughts are coming from. So the child has all of these emotions that are everywhere. Even for adults, it's usually hard, and then your body begins to shut down. So they begin to get into this state, they're asking God, why me? Where were you when this happened? So when it happens, 3 things happen usually in the faith world. It's either the outcome for faith is that when trauma happens, is either faith is rejected or faith is reaffirmed. Then the third one is that faith is transformed, because in the same way where we're asking this question is where we find the answers. But also faith-based healing requires that you sit with these emotions. And because we are not focusing on the fact that it is fully felt, we don't remember to teach these children how to be still. The word is be still. Be still. When we say be still and know, it is also how scripture transforms the healing into sitting down and feeling the emotions, not letting it overwhelm you, but knowing that you have a higher entity. Now that is faith, who that feeling of connectedness makes you feel secure. And then you begin to unleash and begin to talk about how you feel. So instead of telling them that it's in the past, don't worry, you're going to heal. It takes time, even in faith-based communities. It takes time with learning, community. And because these 3 dimensions of trauma, we have to consider it when we're dealing with both children and adults who have experienced this trauma. We should know that the past is not the past. The body remembers. So when there is a trigger, a sound, a smell, an event, a color, an experience that comes up, it is felt, re-traumatization happens again. So the wound just doesn't go away. Then faith and trauma, when you begin to heal, whatever religion you practice, it is together. Because you get to this place of hopelessness, you are asking questions, your mind is opening, you are looking for reason, the connection to a higher entity, which is God, the connection you have with whatever faith you have with everyone coming from the world, because I am a Christian, so I tend to put it's the connection with the Holy Spirit. It gives me this whole oneness that I am not alone. So that feeling of not being alone makes you try to make sense of the pain. You want an explanation, which sends you into a journey of seeking for answers, wanting to know. Then you now begin to learn that healing and faith requires surrender. Surrender for someone who is dealing with a lot of emotion, fear, uncertainty, and anxiety. It can be challenging. Healing trauma through faith requires time where you process the pain, you begin to learn new information, you begin to build a community. A community is that if it's in the place of faith-based community, we all know that the faith we practice comes with love. It comes with assurance. It begins to show you that you are not alone. It begins to give you a hope and a future. It opens opportunities that trauma, the intrusive thoughts have lied to you and have boxed you. So I usually tell people that the healing from trauma, be it for children, when you begin to teach them about the love of God, when you begin to teach them even scriptures, when you begin to show them how you practice your faith in words and in action, because in words and action, the fruit of the Spirit comes in love, patience, kindness. So they begin to experience it. When they experience it, they feel it. It's not just the conversations, but because you are touching them, you are holding them, you are being with them, and then you are having a conversation, giving them attention and communicating with their soul, they begin to expand and they begin to heal. So I hope, as we go through this journey and as we begin to teach even in everything that we do, there is a place for where faith, healing, and trauma all connect. It sets you on a journey of faith, finding yourself, finding your answers, healing, and knowing yourself, and then being able to feel and take back that which was lost. Remember, trauma is also felt in the body. You have to be able to learn to release it. And with releasing comes with surrender. And in surrender, you find what faith is. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Saferworld Foundation. Thank you, Young Pan. Over to you.
Mariam, thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that insightful sharing. Like we all know, we are always connected to something. Whether you're Hindu, whether you're Christian, whether you're Muslim. Thank you, Mariam. One thing that we got from it is that when you feel connected, when you feel loved, when you're touched, when you're shown that someone is willing to listen to you, especially you talked about time, it takes time. So when people are patient with you, somehow the connectedness of your faith helps you through speaking and healing. Indeed, I don't think that anyone can really talk about trauma without adding it with faith. One thing that we have experienced at Saferworld is that when we go to the field, for example, some years ago, we were in Borno, in Dikwa, and while we were taking a lot of women through trauma healing sessions, one session that stood out and the women were able to connect with us was when we gave them a chance to talk about trauma and faith. And one question we threw at them was, how does your faith help you heal from trauma? And how have you coped prior to this time with what you have experienced? And from all of their responses, it seemed that their faith kept them. A lot of the Muslims and Christians had similar responses, like their faith teaches them to do A or B, and even those who are in the African traditional religion. So one thing we know is that faith has a way of ensuring that you stay connected, and this gives you healing. So thank you so much, Mariam. Thank you so much. If you can hear me, we're experiencing a little bit of network challenge, and we're trying to get back in the meeting. So please give us a few seconds to get our videos together. Thank you very much.
Millions of children around the world suffer unthinkable distress due to violent conflicts, natural disasters, and other humanitarian emergencies. This can take a lifelong toll on their emotional health, physical health, and social development. If exposed in early childhood, the experience can even disrupt a child's brain development. Children exposed to conflict face severe emotional stress that can result in psychosocial and lifelong mental issues. Failure to address mental health and psychosocial support stalls a child's development and hinders them from opportunities to participate meaningfully in society. For adolescents, severe distress and exposure to traumatic events can lead to various harmful practices, including alcohol and drug abuse, leading to poor academic performance, low self-esteem, health issues, self-harm, and even suicide. Psychosocial support is an integral part of Saferworld's activity. Saferworld Foundation works to build the resilience of children and their families, helping them cope with adversities during and after a crisis, conflict, or disaster. We offer psychosocial support to children, adolescents, caregivers, families, and the wider communities through a range of intervention that meets their complex needs. At Saferworld Foundation, we work to create and promote conditions where people actively get involved in minimizing and transforming violent conflicts and building peace by providing alternatives to violence. We also ensure that people have access to fair and effective means of addressing grievances and inequalities that drive conflicts. Millions of children around the world suffer unthinkable distress due to violent conflicts, natural disasters, and other humanitarian emergencies. This can take a lifelong toll on their emotional health, physical health, and social development. If exposed in early childhood.
Thank you so much for being patient with us. We have been experiencing some network downtime. We apologize, and again, we'll be back shortly. Please, again, we apologize. Just give us a few minutes and we will be back. Please don't forget to go to the chat box to drop your comments and go and to the toolbox to drop your questions. Thank you again for joining. Don't forget that we have the polls for you to take. We will go straight along to our next speaker. Our next speaker is our fifth speaker, and she will be speaking about play and how it can be helpful in managing childhood trauma. Kindly drop, if you can hear me, please just drop a comment in.
Well, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Our last speaker, also a woman. Everyone knows her as the queen of play. I'm not sure that in Nigeria you can speak about play therapy without mentioning her name. Our next speaker is Lami Tinam Gidado. She will be speaking about play and how it can help in managing trauma. Lami Tinam Gidado is a passionate childhood development consultant and certified play practitioner. The first and only Nigerian-based registrant and member of the Academy of Play and Child Psychotherapy, United Kingdom, with almost 2 decades of experience working with children. She's also a registered childminder from Sweden, UK. As a therapeutic play practitioner and lead trauma counselor, she works with children with behavioral, emotional, and other psychosocial issues, as well as children with learning difficulties in schools and orphanages, using play techniques as well as train caregivers to become trauma sensitive. She owns and runs a learning center, which includes a vacation club, a preschool, and a play therapy room and consulting unit. Lami Gidado is obviously passionate about children, and unlike popular opinion, she knows the value of play and how play is important in a child's life and how it can affect a child's development. Please, with your listening ears again and a warm welcome, let's welcome Lami Gidado for this next speech. Thank you so much for joining. And Lami, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Saferworld Foundation. Can I have my slides, please? Thank you. It's raining here. Thank God it's not as bad as it was earlier on. So you can just move on to the next slide. I'm going to be as quick as possible. Like Rinred said, it's good to be one of the last because others have said most of what needed to be said. So I'm just going to talk about the role of play, really. This is a maze, like you all know. But you know, the thing about trauma is that whichever way you turn, sometimes it's like you keep meeting dead ends. Sometimes you feel like you're not making progress, especially if you work with children. If you're a trauma counselor or a therapist or something, at some point in your work, you may have met a dead end or something when you're facing or dealing with trauma, right? And sometimes it's as if there are landmines in the maze. You know, you feel you're moving on, but you have no idea where the triggers are. And it's like you have to go back and start all over again, you know. So can you move on to the next slide? Next slide, please. This is still another maze. Sometimes you can see where you're headed. You have an idea what the child is facing. You know what the trauma is. So you know that you can get to that middle, you know, but still, you still meet dead ends. We come up with all kinds of trauma healing programs. So even before you meet a child, you feel, oh, there's this trauma healing program that is perfect. It's going to be really good for the children. But unfortunately, you start using that trauma healing program, and then it's still, you know, you still have children that things are not, it's not just working for them, and then you feel frustrated, right? Please, let's move to the next slide. So my work with children, I just want to show you how sometimes, you know, you keep going round around the maze, right? So I want to look at why play for managing trauma. Why should you use play for managing trauma? The first reason is everyone's experience of trauma is different, and the other speakers have said the same thing, you know. So because everyone's experience is different, one size does not fit all. You can't use the same program and expect that it will work for everyone. So, and you know, even if you have siblings from the same family that have experienced the same thing, they may have different presenting conditions, right? So why should you use play? You know, because with play, it's multisensory. Children can try different things. It is said that something will work for somebody sometime. So when you have different things that you're using through play, something is going to work for someone at some time. The second reason is that children do not have words to express themselves, and they don't have long-term memory skills yet. So children, they don't have the language ability to be able to express to you that this is what is wrong with me. They can't even make the connection between a traumatic event, you know, and how they're feeling, how they're behaving. As Ubike talked about the behavior as the language, but they can show you through the behavior, but they cannot make the connection between a trauma and their behavior. Then the other thing is that they don't have the logical thinking skills to be able to put all of it together, you know, to express that to you. But children can use play to show you how they're feeling. I'll give you some examples. I had a child that whose parents were getting a divorce, or they had already divorced. And she was referred to me for play therapy because she wasn't able to express emotions. The teacher noticed that she wasn't able to express emotions, and she wasn't talking about the issue in the family. But every time she comes into the playroom, she would do some kind of role play, and she would pick mommy, daddy, herself, her brother, and she would role play. And she, you know, when children are role playing, they're saying things. Where are those words coming from? They come from the things that they hear us say. So she was actually, she would sort of demonstrate fights that went on or conversations that went on and all of that. So it showed me that there were things in her unconscious mind that play was beginning to help her to dig out and bring it to consciousness. You know, I had another child who, every time he came, he would play with my sandbox, and he would put the toys in two groups. He would have a group with, for example, he would have toy soldiers, and then in the other group, you would have other kinds of people. And then they're coming together, they're fighting, and then there's always good wins, you know, and all of that. The others may go to jail, and almost every time he came for sessions, and I had about 20-something sessions with him, almost every time he came to sessions, he would play in that manner. Later on, I realized that the values at home were different from values in school. So there was conflict, you know, in his mind, in his body, and he just didn't know how to process it, you know, until we were able to bring school and home together to discuss it. And it was showing in his, I think it was the third speaker that talked about how it affects learning as well. So it was reflecting in his learning that, you know, he was in the bottom of the class, but now he's doing well because he has been able to bring those things to consciousness and deal with them. And then the third reason is simply that play is the language that children understand and speak. That's just what they speak. And the examples I gave you is I think it covers that. Can we move to the next slide? I'm someone who is very conscious of time. Move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So how can play heal trauma? So play, no, sorry, you're going fast. You're going fast. The last slide. So play causes changes in the brain by developing new neural pathways. So new neural pathways means, you know, changes in the brain. It's something, you know, there are connections in the brain, right? So in this case, and I think Greenret mentioned it, that talking can be useless sometimes because just sitting a child and saying that you're doing talk therapy may not work for the child. But through play, because with play, children have repetition, they have rhythmic activities, which sort of causes changes in the brain. So this is how brain helps, and play helps. And also play releases chemicals like oxytocin and some other chemicals that make our moods better. You know, children become happier, even adults, you know. Last year, I started having this ringing in my ears, and it's still there. And my husband is a doctor. I had seen several doctors, and they just didn't know what to do for me. And I had to tell myself, you're a play therapist, what can you do for yourself? Because they told me that the ringing is something that a lot of people have experienced. It's sort of normal. So, but they didn't have medicines to help me. And I started reading about it online, and it said that I needed cognitive behavioral therapy. So I said, well, I'm a play therapist. What can I do for myself? I got a box of coloring pencils, all kinds of pencils and stuff. And then I got an adult coloring book and I kept it by my bedside. At that time, I couldn't fall asleep. Like I had spent more than a month, I wasn't sleeping. So I was cranky, I wasn't going to work. I was just, I was miserable. I think it was more the emotional and psychological drain rather than the physical illness. So one night I just took my coloring pencils and my book and I started coloring. I didn't know when I fell asleep, but I did. I fell asleep. And then I started doing that every night, and that changed my sleep pattern completely. I still have the ringing in my ears, but what my activities has done for me is that it has helped me to be able to cope with my situation. So that's what play does. Play helps children to cope with their situation. So the trauma is not going away. Sandra talked about the fact that what you experience, right? But play helps you to learn coping skills. It helps you to learn coping skills. It helps you to identify that this is what works for me. So this is where I will keep going back to when I start feeling all of these things all over my body, So play has all of that effect. And when the brain changes, it can be for bad. So bad experiences like trauma can change the brain. And that is why our work seems hard. And that's why sometimes talk therapy alone is not enough, but play can change the brain for good. So good experiences, play is good experiences. It can change the brain for good. So positive experiences can help, help us heal from trauma. The second reason is that play therapy, or even play, even ordinary play, right, provides safety for traumatized children. The whole idea behind therapy is to provide that safety for children. Children need consistency, and they find that when they have opportunities for play or for play therapy. Children need secure attachments. Everybody has talked about relationships, but I must stress that that relationship has to be a positive relationship. If you're going to have therapy with a child, it must be that you have developed a trusting relationship with them. I always tell people, if you're going to do trauma counseling for children, start with developing a positive, safe relationship with the child first. The child needs to trust you before they can start to heal. And you can find ways of developing that trust through playful activities. So you don't have to be a play therapist, but if you work with children, even if you're a parent and you're here, if you want your children to trust you, it has to start with making sure that they are safe. And remember that what adults think is safe may not be what children think is safe. I'll give you an example. And they're afraid of my toys. The first time that happened, it seemed so unusual to me that a child would be afraid of the toys. But the child didn't feel safe. Some of my toys didn't make that child feel safe. And I've seen one child after another come to my play therapy room, and there are some particular toys that they don't feel safe with. So when those kids are coming, I take those toys away. Maybe they prefer just arts. Some prefer just play, So play therapy provides safety for traumatized children. Next slide. And I think I'm done, but next slide. Okay. All right. So I just want to add that, when children play, someone said that the opposite of depression is play. And even for adults, I give you an example with myself, right? The opposite of depression is play. So when children play, it reduces anxiety. If you are a playful adult around them, they feel safe with you. So I want to leave you with this word, Virginia Axline is one of the founders of play therapy. And she says, enter into children's play and you will find the place where their minds, hearts, and souls meet. You can't, it's like I said, it's the language that they understand. You know, for you to make sense to them, you have to enter into their world, and you can do that through play. My last slide, please. Last slide. So I'm leaving all of us with this prayer because I believe that most people who have joined are maybe trauma counselors, but even if you're a parent, it is said that if you have worked with traumatized people, you probably had your own trauma even as a child, you know, but I believe that in this day and age that we live, even in Nigeria, many people are facing trauma or have faced trauma. So I'm leaving us with this prayer. May we heal our own wounds so that our children have a cleaner canvas upon which to paint their own life. Amen. So thank you, Safer World, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. That was, and we just love how it ended. Indeed, you cannot give what you don't have. So it's very, very important that we find our own healing so that we can give a clean slate for our children. This is one of the reasons why in the first place we decided to do this on Children's Day. We realized that most parents focus on a lot of buying, a lot of gifting, and sometimes we forget to gift ourselves with knowledge on how to better position ourselves as parents, as caregivers, and everyone who just gives support to children. Thank you to our amazing, amazing, amazing speakers. One thing that we are going to take there from is indeed, play is where the safety for children. And there's a common saying in Hausa that says that our sani anakada disket. And if you are, if you know Hausa a little bit, you understand that most times you spend with children, it is from where they play that you get certain information. So play should not be undermined. It is important in caring for children, especially when it comes to healing their trauma. I will say that our 5 speakers have done an amazing, amazing job this evening. And we have some questions. So I'll just say that once we put out the questions, if any of the panelists is open to answer, please just speak up and answer. We also have some comments. Please go to the comments box. People are sharing ideas. You can get some ideas there. Also, I'll just answer one question myself before we put out the questions to the panelists. We have someone asking that, are we going to get these materials? Are we going to get these slides? Are we going to get the recording? Please fill in the survey that we have just put in the comment box. The survey will help us get your emails, and all of this information, the recording will be shared with you. We know how terrible network is today. We are experiencing a downtime ourselves, but we will be sharing the recording. It's been really an amazing evening. So we'll be sharing recordings, but please fill in the survey so that we can send them to you via email. Again, if you are joining or you have joined this, please follow Saferworld Foundation on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and on YouTube to see the work that we've been doing. Also follow our partners back-to-back Ministries, Nigeria, and Kingdom Kids Club on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Thank you again for joining. So we'll go ahead with the question. Someone is asking, and I'm sure it's because the first speaker mentioned that one way to help children with their trauma is by placing them in families. And she's asking that how are adoption modalities initiated? This is a whole lot of questions, but I will just suggest that we ask the speaker if she's willing for us to share her email so that if you have any questions about adoption, you can ask directly to her. So if she okays it, I'm sure she'll unmute her mic and let us know so that we can share her email with you. If you have any questions about adoption, you can ask. But I'll also suggest that you follow Kingdom Kids. They have a lot of snippets about adoption. You will find your answers there. We also have a question that says, how do you differentiate a language delay caused by trauma and one caused by developmental delay or disorder. Please, any of the speakers who is willing to answer this, please go ahead and respond to this question. I don't know if you can hear us. If you can hear us, please, any of the speakers can go ahead to answer this question, please. Can you hear us?
Okay, can I say something?
Yes, please. Please
Okay,
go ahead.
For me, I would usually tell people that, this is not something you can answer without seeing the child. And you would need to have a trained specialist to be able to tell you what exactly is going on with the child. But just telling you that this is what you can do to differentiate it is not enough, because each case is different, each child is different. So, for example, when someone comes to me for assessment, I would usually, first of all, ask them to go have a medical assessment first. And sometimes they find that there's a medical issue, right? And then if you rule out medical, then I know the next, either a therapist or an assessor to send the person to. So these things don't work this way. Like you can't get the answer, from us like this. Someone needs to see the child to be able to know what to do.
Okay, thank you for answering. Okay, we can't really hear you. I don't know if you can hear us, but we can't really hear you. Making sense for me.
Yampan, it's okay if you can share my email.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, thank you, Slami, for answering that. Our next question is, my child is just 4 months old. He suddenly started screaming when my mother-in-law and mom traveled back. Although it has stopped, I just want to know if he was experiencing trauma from their departure. Someone wants to know, can a 4-month-old child be experiencing some type of trauma? Or is it just a child missing a parent or a grandparent and just expressing himself and not necessarily be called trauma? I don't know if anybody wants to share some highlights on this.
Okay, let me take that. Let me take that. Okay, so, children easily form attachment from touch and smell, right? We have different attachments. So usually when a child is attached to your smell, and then maybe they must have formed emotional attachment around you, and they're used to sensing you. So when there is a separation, they usually feel it because they have to now go through the process of adopting towards someone. So it might not really be, it could be that the child was missing your mom, but it could be an attachment that was broken. And then it can also form through another attachment. All the child needs to feel is that safety and that love and comfort. So with soothing and you forming new attachment and connection, it could go a very long way. Hope this helps.
Hope that this, thank you. Okay, thank you, Mirek. We hope that this helps. Someone is also asking that, are there cases where kids do not talk and act out when traumatized? I think that all of the speakers, especially the first to give examples of children who do not speak but act out. But I don't know if she's asking for a particular scenario Azubike, I don't know if you want to share something about that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I answered the question, but anyway, that quote, what they can talk out, they act out, is either they are talking or they are not talking. So if they are not talking, they're actually acting out their feelings, acting out what they are not expressing using words. So it's either they are talking or they are not talking. So that statement, what they can talk out, they act out. So it's either they are silent or they are acting it out. So one of the two.
Okay, thank you, Azubike. So just to add on it, we already know that most times children express trauma by acting in or acting out. And like you rightly said, sometimes being withdrawn can be acting in, sometimes not talking can also be showing those signs. If you check the comments box, we've shared the email of Sandra Chikan in case you want to reach out with more questions about adoption. We also have another question that says, in Nigeria, we have day and boarding schools. From your assertion, is it safe to say parents should enroll their kids in day schools? And I'm sure this question is coming up from all of the incidents that we've seen in terms of bullying in boarding school, that a child even lost their lives, or the sex tape that leaked from a boarding school recently.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I raised the issue of parents should be closer to their kids. In the modern times, many parents wants to take their kids to a best school, which is a boarding school.
Respond to that.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Peter, are you trying to respond? Please
Yes.
get your mic closer so we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, I'm saying that many parents would want to take their kids to a boarding school because of the results oriented. Especially you want to take your child to a secondary school, which is a boarding school, so that you can have enough time there and perform well and to go to the university. Currently, we are experiencing issues to do with lesbianism, bullying, drug abuse, sex tape leaking from the boarding schools, and many parents have given teachers the parenting responsibility of their kids, which has the pros and cons on both sides. However, we encourage both parents who take their kids to boarding and day school to be very close to their kids to make sure they are following on their activities, they are following on what they're doing, they are following on their studies, they're creating time just to talk to them to make sure that they balance both parenting and also academic when it comes to wanting your child to perform well and forgetting that the upbringing of that child also involve parents. And we encourage parents who are busy because of other life stresses and responsibility to make sure they are closer to their kids, so that at the end of it all, a child should not come back from a boarding school with a behavior that will traumatize him or lead him into a destructive mode.
Okay, thank you so much, Peter, for answering that. The questions are very similar, and I see that the panelists have even responded to some in the comments. As you know, we are running out of time, and it's really been an exciting evening. However, we're going to let just two participants give comments. So if you want to give a comment, please just show by raise of hand so we unmute you. Just two participants to give a comment so that we can round up. We really don't want to end this, but based on the feedback that we're getting, I'm sure that we'll have another round of this webinar coming up very soon, just to follow up on what we started. So if you're a participant, you have any question, or you just want to give a comment quickly so that we can just round up quickly, then I think someone is raising up their hand. If you could just allow them to, someone is raising up their hand. Please kindly unmute so that you can go ahead and respond.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is
Modupe Adelamba.
Good afternoon, Mama.
Okay, we can't really hear you, Modupe. Please, can you?
I've unmuted myself. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes, please. We can hear you.
Let me quickly do because, okay, yes, I'm into child sexual abuse and going to schools and all that. Recently, about a few days ago, I had, because most kids are traumatized. You know, I get them to write stuff, and what they write, it's not something that anybody can be ever happy. What they are going through every day, the trauma, and their parents are not there. You know, I'm looking at bad, I would say bad parenting nowadays. A lot of people, the kids say their parents don't have time for them. They are not listening to them. They are shutting them up each time they want to talk. This particular boy said they sleep over, you know, especially that sleeping over at other people's cousins' place and all that. So the cousin has been raping him. And then when we were now called, we were asking that, why did you tell your parents? He said the mom, we not believe her and we beat her. We beat him, sorry. So it saddened my heart that how my child will tell me what's going on in his life, and he's just about 8 years old. You know, can you imagine the kind of trauma that he was going through? What if I didn't go to that school that day? The other one too, the sister has been using something to bang his penis, and he didn't like it. He told the mother, and then she still kept on doing it. And these are kids that will come to school, and then their grades will be falling. You'll be wondering what exactly is going on. A lot of kids are going through trauma. There are ones in a secondary school, you know, after I've given whatever at the school, talk, they came to me in secondary school. And some of them, you know, there was one that said she borrowed her mom's phone to do some work, and then what she saw there was vagina. And, you know, she was shocked. The other one too, there was one that she used the mom's phone, and all she got from in there is several ways of having sex. So it's not, I mean, even we that we are doing this kind of work, we need a lot of self-care because so it's not easy. It's really not easy. Kids are going through stuff, very traumatized, and they are crying out to people to help, but they cannot physically cry out because nobody is listening. Thank you very much for everything.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Modupe, for that insightful. I'm sure that what you have shared is just to further tell people how much children are hurt, and now more than ever, how much we need to be trauma informed. One of the reasons for this webinar is not for just people to come here, listen and talk, but we are hoping that by the time you go out of here, you share more about it. Tell somebody to tell somebody to tell somebody. We cannot just sit in our rooms and just complain about what is happening in terms of trauma. We need to do what we can where we are. So it is important that we support in trauma information and we keep sharing until everyone knows about it. Thank you so much for the comment. Thank you to our participants for joining. Like we said, to know more and to learn more about trauma and how to help people and how to partner with us, please follow us at Saferworld Foundation on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn. You can also check out our website, www.saferworldfoundation.org. Also, you can check out our partners for more information about child care and trauma. Kingdom Kids Club on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and also back-to-back Ministries. I'm sure that there's a lot to learn from their several pages. Don't forget that today is Children's Day. We thank Saferworld Foundation, all of the staff and team at Saferworld Foundation. We thank Kingdom Kids Club and Back-to-Back Ministries. We thank our speakers who are going to do this with us. We also thank the participants for taking the time to come here to listen, to share, and to ask all of the necessary questions. It's been an exciting evening. We look forward to doing more of this. Don't forget to fill the survey. If you have filled it, we will be sharing all of this recording with you. It's been a really exciting evening. There's so much to learn. There's something that every one of us can do. There's still so much that we can do out there. Let's all remember that we cannot give what we don't have. So go out there, learn more, add more knowledge, and let's do our best and be intentional in raising the children in our care. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Happy Children's Day. And don't forget to show a child love. To do that, please donate something to Kingdom Kids Club when you can. If you can, follow them on Facebook to know how to donate. You can also share information about this webinar with the hashtag Trauma Informed World and hashtag Children's Day. Again, happy Children's Day to all of you. We send you love and light. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Shioni, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yanni. Thank you for doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Hi, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Red, thank you.
Thank you.
Mwah.
It's good to connect. Azubike and everyone.
Yes. Mhm. Right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.